okay, now if just because you believe in Goddess Durga, someone says that you cannot believe in her, and if you do, you'll be punished. I think one of the most disturbing ones was that India is the weakest link in the Quad. India is actively shaping choices. And the world is taking cognizance of it. Other narratives are that the Squad will replace the Quad.
Okay.
Squad hasn't yet replaced the Quad.
Many of you would have heard about the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which is popularly known as the Quad. But did you know that the Chinese perceived it as the Ocean Froth, which later and now more recently perceived as Asia's NATO? We have a prolific academician who's also a very dear friend with us today, who will give you details of a book which she has edited on Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. This is Books and Banters, a Dialoguers digital original series, and we have with us today Professor Sriparna Pathak from the Chinese Studies and founding director of the Center of Northeast Asian Studies at the O.P. Jindal Global University. Welcome to the show, Sriparna.
Thank you so much, Portia. Always wonderful to speak with you.
To begin with, let's start with when did your fascination with China and the Indo-Pacific region begin?
I think my fascination would go back to 2006 during my master's in GNU, and there were two reasons as to why it came out. One is a more cultural or religion or Buddhism based reason, and the other is more economic, but both have connections with foreign policy. So I think back in 2006, I had gone to Dharamshala just during vacations, and I saw a shop which said that we don't sell made in China products. So back then in my head, because I used to be very, I used to really like economics and I still do. In my head, it was like, okay, consumer surplus, comparative advantage. Why would someone not sell Chinese products? Because this shopkeeper, he can make profits. Is he irrational? Is he illogical? Why would he not sell made in China products? They are cheap. So I decided to go and ask him. And I asked him that, Uncle, but why do you not sell made in China products? So he just looked at me and he asked me, are you from Dharamshala? So I said, no, I have come from Delhi, but my home is in Jamshedpur. So he said, okay. So he's like, let me put it in a way in which you'll understand. So I said, okay, fair enough. He said, if, say, someone would ensure that you're trapped in Delhi forever and you can't go back to Jamshedpur, how would you feel? So I laughed at him. I said, that doesn't happen. How can that even happen? It doesn't happen. So he said, no, let's just assume it happens. I said, I won't feel good because I want to go back home to my family. So he said, do you believe in God? I said, I do. And Durga Puja is my favorite festival and all sorts of things. So he's like, okay, now if just because you believe in Goddess Durga, someone says that you cannot believe in her, and if you do, you'll be punished. I laughed at him again. I said, no, it doesn't happen like that. I haven't done anything wrong. So he's like, no, you assume that has happened to you. You are locked down in Delhi. You can't go back to your home. You can never see Jamshedpur. And you can definitely not celebrate Durga Puja. So I started getting irritated and agitated because just the thought of it was annoying.
Absolutely.
So he said, and if the person who has done this to you, if he or she comes to you and says, sell my products, would you sell his or her product? I flared up. I said, I would break the products. Why would I sell? This is oppression. So he said, same logic. Why should I sell China's products? That's when I realized. I said, oh, I'm so sorry, uncle. I didn't mean it that way. He said, why don't you go to Jimmy's Italian Kitchen, which I revisited last year, 20 years later when I went back. It's changed completely. He said, there's a lot of literature on the struggle. And he said, I am aghast, and I'm sorry, he said it in Hindi, that, your government has given us refuge. They have given us a home. India is our second home. Tibet is, of course, our home. But you youngsters do not know anything about it. It is so disheartening. So that just hurt a lot. So I decided I will read more on this. Fair enough. So I kept reading more and more. And somehow these discourses had never come to us in the school curriculum.
Absolutely.
Which we study. I do not know why. I wish I knew the reason why. But I started digging more and more. When I did have to choose my MPhil dissertation topic, I decided I wanted to do it on economics. Why economics? I come from the steel city of India, which is Jamshedpur. Now, while I was studying China constantly, and I took multiple papers on China during masters, I heard this narrative that China has lifted 100 million people out of poverty. Cut to today, India has also lifted at least 300 million people out of poverty. That never makes it to the books, never even makes it to the newspapers. Definitely didn't make it to way
Back
back
then.
in 2006. So I, however, had a question because I had read quite a lot. In my head, it was like, I come from Jamshedpur, steel city of India, the only city in India which is not run by the state. It doesn't have a municipal corporation. It's run by the Tatas.
Hmm.
But my education, school education, was subsidized by a private entity. During Durga Pujas or festivals, my dad, who was an employee of Tata, had a bonus which came from this private entity, even if the private entity had made a loss. Our water was free, electricity was free. Back then, we definitely didn't have smartphones.
Correct.
We had a base phone, that was also free. Housing was
The
free.
landlines.
Everything, yeah, the landlines. So in my head, it kept going that, okay, we have a decent, stable life. We are Tata Nagar. Why is it we haven't made it to the discourse? Laborers have rights, definitely have rights. We even have free education. And Jamshedpur has one of the best English medium schools in India. So why is it that China's model is so talked about? China has lifted 100 million people out of poverty. Well, Tatas don't let people slip into poverty.
That's true.
Okay, I understand Tata Nagar is just a city, but why is the discourse not there? So it kept going on in my head. So when I finally took my MPhil topic, I decided I wanted to learn more about the Chinese economy and figure out what were the policies. Why is it that there's so much of thrill and excitement around it? Is it actually true or is it actually? So these two kept pushing me, and before I realized, it became my area of specialization.
It's actually a fascinating journey and such life examples from to learn from, and help you understand the strategic depth. Because even if I remember correctly, I don't think people even thought research was a field to grow on as a career option. And you've taken live examples, researched on it, and made it your core expertise. I mean, kudos to you for coming all the way from there. It's not easy, whether it is a big city, small city, irrespective, to take something that you have experienced personally and make it your life goal is commendable.
Thank you.
From there, if I could ask you, do you remember the first time you encountered the, let's say, the thought of quad? And what exactly was your initial reaction?
So, as I progressed in my, whole quest for research, my guru, my permanent guru, Professor Srikant Kondapalli, had also told me that if you really want to understand China, you will need to understand their language, because the discourse that they have in the Chinese language and what they portray in the China dailies and global times in English is very different. Also, you will have to go and live there as a common civilian.
Right.
So only then would you be able to understand. So I did that. I bagged a fellowship from the MHRD, and it was with Chinese Scholarship Council. This is way back in 2011. One thing which my guru had told me, Professor Kondapalli, is that you need to understand the human brain. If you really are going to learn the language, try and not use English or any other language that you're comfortable in. You'll have to force your brain. So what he had said, that while it is great you have friends from across the world, try and make friends with the people with whom you don't have a common language. So maybe it would be the Japanese, maybe it would be the South Koreans, and so on. Now, as fate would have it, in 2007, the Quad did come up because the late Shinzo Abe, but unfortunately, Australia pulled out of it because of Chinese pressure and so on. When I did go to China in 2011, I had heard of the Quad, but it was pretty much defunct. As fate would have it, my best friends were from the Quad countries. And while two of them were from English speaking countries, Australia and the US, we used to converse specifically in Chinese. And of course, there was Japan as a friend. So I don't know what exact mix destiny, fate, and my study really had, but that stayed with me even after I came back. And in 2017, Donald Trump revived the
Yeah.
Quad, and after that, we also started soon having, easily available internet and phones. And now we have AI. So my algorithm, fortunately or unfortunately, keeps throwing stuff
Which is
about
quad
the quad.
related. Yeah.
So I decided that I need to understand more. There has to be a reason why these four have come together. What was the reason? Yeah, okay, there was a temporary pause in between. But we were resilient. The quad came back. So where do we go on from here? So I kept researching more and more and more. And, because we are democracies, we believe in being together.
Right.
China, unfortunately, is a revisionist state. So, and there are concerns, all four have. So, which is why I thought of how can friendship camaraderie, be leveraged in international relations, and we can understand it through this grouping. And during the pandemic, vaccine Maitri and all the overtures which the Quad countries did, because we wanted to save human lives, that was something which struck me even deeper. That we do think alike. Yeah, we might be different in our English accents or mother tongues or even governance structures, minor differences here and there. But there is something which is tying us together. So, kept pushing myself to study more about the Quad.
So, while you were studying quad, and learning about it, what was some of the most surprising facts or document or conversation you encountered while researching for your book?
So, first, the idea, I think in 2024, I had written an article for the Hindustan Times on basically China's illiberal economics and as to how it arm twists various countries, including India, including Australia, for political goals, and it does through economic overtures. Say, for example, when the pandemic with origins in China struck, and Australia had asked for an independent, inquiry into the
Yes.
origins. The PRC basically said that we will stop imports of barley, wine, beef, etc., from Australia, which ensured that there is an economic cost to it.
Yeah.
They do a lot of it, and now that we are in 2026, they've been trying to do that with rare earths, with India, and so on. So I had written on that. Now, op-eds, unfortunately, in newspapers can be just 850 to 900 words. So,
True.
as much as I would want to
Limitation.
write more, I could not write. So, an Australian diplomat reached out to me, and I had a conversation with me, and he tried to tell that, Australia is pushing back in its own ways. So, I said, with all due respect, I know that, but I need more space in terms of words to write that.
Yeah.
And this was just an op-ed. So he said, fair, why don't you write it? It stayed with me. Of course, I wanted to write on it. I said, okay. Then I said, sir, again, I have one question with regards to the Quad. There are so many confusions, and people say it's useless. China initially called it Ocean Froth as well. So he said, have you seen a duck? I said, yeah, of course, I've seen ducks many times. So he's like, no, like a duck on a lake. I said, yeah, I have. So he's like, when it's sitting on the lake, it seems like it's just still, right? So I said, yeah, it does. He's like, but do you know its legs are constantly moving? I said, yeah, I do know that. Of course, I know that. That's how it moves. So he's like, what is that? You will not get to know because we
See,
don't
yeah.
make these grand pronouncements, but we are working and it's constantly working. You'll have to dig a bit deeper. So that was 24. So I was like, okay, this stays with me. I will dig deeper. So that's why the whole idea came, and I encountered way too many misconceptions about the Quad.
Yeah.
So I decided, why not have a book on it?
So, you actually lead me to the next question. So, now that you've come up with so many misconceptions, what would you say was one of the most starking misconception of quad, which even experts seem to repeat?
I think one of the most disturbing ones was that India is the weakest link in the Quad. Truth be said, India didn't ever withdraw from the Quad.
Correct.
It was Australia which
It
came
was
into the
Australia, yeah.
pressure. But the narrative is that India is the weakest link. Maybe the narrative is pushed out by PRC bots, PRC handles, but it is there in not just Indian academia, but global academia. Second is that India doesn't do enough. Well, India holds down the PLA. The Western Theatre Command, we're still holding them down, as opposed to Japan or the US or Australia. So there is quite a lot which India has done, but it doesn't form part of the discourses. So I thought it's important that this be brought out, that we are not a weak partner. We didn't do anything wrong. Why is it that all the wrongs keep getting slapped onto India?
Yeah.
So, which is why I'm very sure, I'm 100% sure at the government levels, there is understanding of what India does. But why is it that at the academic or the media level, that this constant pushing of blame onto India, even within as fantastic a thing as the Quad, just keeps happening. So I was like, I want to dispel this myth.
Wonderful. At Books and Banter, we celebrate the journey of the author. So, if you could share with us, what was your journey like from the initial idea of this book to its publication?
So I think one fine day I was sitting in Khan Market in a coffee shop uh, with this friend who's my co-editor, Dr. Monojit Das, and I was ranting about there are so many misconceptions about the Quad, about India's role, and so on. So he looked at me and he said, "Ma'am, so why don't we write a book on it?" So I said, "Can we do that?" He said, "Yeah, sure." Can you write out the basic idea? I said, "Yeah, give me 24 hours, I'll do it." So he said, "Okay, I'll also add a bit, and then let's start reaching out to publishers."
Yeah.
So we reached out to a bunch of publishers, and we were lucky to get the publishers, but we also had to get chapters from various books. Now our approach was that we don't want to just make it India centric, because then we enter the same game again.
Yeah.
We keep getting lambasted that it's just
lose the main thing.
So we reached out to a lot of scholars, especially from the 4 Quad countries. But we also reached out to some other countries which have very active Indo-Pacific strategies, like the UK, for example,
Right.
or even Italy, for example, or even Philippines, for example, Taiwan, for example, and so on, so that we get in their perspectives about the Indo-Pacific. They might not be part of the Quad, but we have similar approaches in the Indo-Pacific. So I think this went on for about a year, with chapters and constant back and forth with the authors, compiling everything. Took a year and a half. So, but it was a good journey, I would say.
And during this journey, what would you say was the most challenging aspect of editing this book? And, was it very difficult to keep pace with the rapidly evolving events, navigating the narratives that keep coming about on Quad?
I think the biggest heartbreak which I had was last year when the Quad Leaders Summit didn't happen.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it coincided with my book going for publication. So I had to.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, because I had to prepare for questions that, the Quad Leaders Summit hasn't happened. So is the Quad even effective? Going back to ground zero.
Correct. After all the effort.
After all the effort. So that was difficult. The chapter on the US, of course, that also had to be constantly changed and
Right.
reworked. It is an American scholar who's written that, but for him also, constantly making those changes, because there are policy changes which are happening on a day-to-day basis now on Truth Social. So what does one really do? So somehow translating that academically, putting it into the book, was a big challenge. But I think we navigated it, because even though the Leaders Summit didn't happen, Australia, Japan and India have been in active conversations. In fact, we've had some military exercises, etc., even with the US. So I think it's just a story of the Quad's resilience. We've had a setback once in 2008. We survived it. So this is maybe just another one. This is not as bad as the last one, wherein one country has completely withdrawn. But yeah, this is just a lesson to be learned on how to make ourselves more resilient.
As the editor or the author of the book, did your perception of Quad change at any point of time during this process?
Mine didn't change. It just, my whole perspective of why the Quad is necessary just got strengthened. Because,
Makes sense.
while there is traditional security, there's also non-traditional security. And last year, after Operation Sindoor, the whole discourse around terrorism and counter-terrorism also came into the Quad. So, as global events unfold, we have a grouping which more or less understands each other. So, unfortunately, Indian civilians and one Nepali citizen was killed in Pahalgam. But our friends and partners within the Quad understood that. So, the discourse on that started. This is a new arena which we are looking at. So, the importance and the necessity of the Quad, for me, it just increased as I kept studying more and more about it.
Was there any particular chapter that you had to edit multiple times because it was just not matching to the imagination you've had of Quad?
There's one on basically critical minerals. And because China keeps changing its stances,
Absolutely.
especially vis-a-vis the US, vis-a-vis India as well, that, we will sell you critical minerals, but do not sell it to the US. It's like, you sell me something, the money transaction has happened, and then I say, no, I will still control what you can do with it.
Unrealistic terms and conditions.
So constantly changing that and reworking, because the countries also then started tackling in different ways. What do we do here? Critical minerals mission in India, we have it. US has its own stances. So constantly plotting that and making the additions, that kind of was a bit tiring. But this is how IR is in real life, and
That's true. Coming to more aspects of your book, the title of your book captures a remarkable transformation, which I mentioned earlier, from Ocean Froth to Asian NATO. So, what made you choose this framing, and what does it tell us about changing geopolitical landscape of the Indo-Pacific?
So, when the late Shinzo Abe had talked about the Quad, China had said, "Oh, it's nothing at all. It's going to dissipate like ocean froth." So for them back then, it was ocean froth, which is easily dismissible, and they did succeed because they ensured one of the countries pulls out of it. But cut to, since 2017 when it was revived, they're calling it Asian NATO. This is not a military grouping at all.
At all.
Yet they call it. So something has changed. So there is one chapter also on the changing perceptions of China and what led to this change in China's perceptions. Why is it that at one point they thought, oh, these four countries can do nothing at all? But today they understand that, yeah, cooperation and collaboration is so strong that it should be compared to an Asian version of a military grouping like NATO. So there has to be some change. So we plot that. I wanted to bring that out. That, a lot of people, a lot of academics say that, oh, Quad is futile. It is useless. If it was that useless, why would China shift from calling it Ocean Froth to Asian NATO? So that was the whole idea, and that's why the title. And I was hell bent on the title. I didn't want to change. We got suggestions from the publishers also. Would you want to go with it? I said, no, I will stay with this because I want to showcase that it has become more potent. So, Ocean Froth to Asian NATO.
And what would you say was, apart from this, a very surprising factor for you that you would say has come about in Quad's evolution? And was there a moment you realized that Quad had become much more than a diplomatic dialogue?
Yes, I think during the pandemic with its origins in China, and as to how all the four countries got together, because if you look at China's outreaches, especially in the Indo-Pacific countries, they give soft loans, they try to showcase that they are trying to push for sustainable development and so on. Other countries hadn't thought about this, but this, the pandemic years pushed the four to think about how do we go about it. People matter, especially in Indo-Pacific countries. How do we help them? How do we push for sustainable development? Vaccine maitris and all of that is great. But then we also started offering fellowships for STEM education because the next generation is important. And again, this region is important because we've got positive demographic dividend. So we also have to plan for the future. So when I started looking at the scholarships which they are offering, for example, the question which came to my head is why? What purpose does it solve? It also caters to the needs of the next generation.
Right.
Quad is not dissipating like ocean froth.
Yes.
Not now, not tomorrow, not for the next 10 to 20 years.
Certainly. How did China's perception of Quad from dismissal to concern came about, and what would you say some of the major factors for this shift?
I think first is the revival of the Quad, because they had successfully ensured that it dissipates temporarily, like the ocean froth.
Right.
But Trump 1.0 ensured that there is a revival. During the pandemic also, the Quad stayed. Discussions kept happening. Also, India per se, as its economy started getting stronger and stronger, also militarily started developing. For a lot of Southeast Asian countries, India currently is hoping to be a net security provider. BrahMos missiles exports just to Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, so on. So that became a game changer. Now the silent reticent India, in its silent reticent ways, was also doing things. And those things were now getting visible. was also getting into economic partnerships, be it in South Asia, in Hambantota, going in as the first and last respondent, and the respondent which has value and doesn't debt trap other countries or comes in during water crisis and so on. I think that is what led China to do a serious rethink, that this grouping is not going to be an ocean froth. There is something else going beyond that. However, they do the psychological understanding and profiling of countries as well.
Right.
Which is why they understood that India itself won't want a military grouping, because India is never for alliances.
Right.
Doesn't work well for us given our history. Uh, can't really 100% trust some countries, and by that I don't mean Japan. So they understood that India will not go for an alliance system.
Right.
Start calling it an alliance system. Get the hatred at the civil society level against the Quad. Understand the psychology and start pushing this narrative. Start calling, it is never a military grouping. It never really was. What we are trying is sustainable development. What we are trying is creating stability in the Indo-Pacific. So why Asian NATO? It's very cleverly done by the PRC. It understands India would not be okay with a military grouping. We don't take parts in military groupings. Never part of NATO or SEATO or CENTOS or whatever. So why would we be part of it now? So which is why
that was also precisely the NAM basis.
Yeah.
The non-alignment.
And we cherish our strategic neutrality. Now, I think every second country in the world is now using
Opting
India's
for it, yes.
lexicon. So, which is why they thought that let's push out this whole narrative and somehow influence foreign policy decisions by calling it a military grouping like NATO. But yes, the perception changed. Otherwise, they wouldn't do this. China, all said and done, is a rational actor. Unlike a Pakistan. But China is a rational actor. If it is doing something, there has to be reason behind it.
Pragmatism. What unique value, according to you, does India bring to the Quad which cannot be replicated by other members of the Quad?
I think given the current epoch of history that we are living through, in this great power rivalry that we see globally between US and China, I think this time is just apt to showcase that India is the rational choice forward. We don't engage in hassling our allies or friends, just the way the US is currently doing. We do not engage in illiberal economics, the way PRC is doing. We do not go for neocolonialism, the way the PRC is doing. So, helps us showcase India's might and India's story as the rational choice. We have never gone in for aggression, never been the first to attack. We believe in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, world as one family. We have been helpful. Whenever a Sri Lanka has been in distress, or a Bangladesh, or a Nepal, India has gone in. So we have to look at the silver lining. And I think the Quad is also a brilliant platform to showcase that.
Right.
Earlier, the characterization of India 20 years ago was of a poor country, which can just be silent and reticent and just a recipient of others' choices. India is actively shaping choices. And the world is taking cognizance of it. EU, for example, wants to be India's new bestie right now. Right? That is just one example. So things have changed. So even within the Quad, the fact that the whole discourse on terrorism came in,
Right.
it showcases that India now has value. India is the rational choice forward. We do things through strategic neutrality. We understand the options we have. We understand the value of partnerships and friendships. Japan has been a time-tested friend and always will be. So we just do things like that, and Quad becomes a brilliant platform. Other narratives are that the Squad will replace the Quad.
Okay.
Squad hasn't yet replaced the Quad. So if it had to, it would have by now.
Would have by now.
Because, the leader summit didn't happen, but we're still having other sorts of meetings. So I think that's why the Quad remains important, especially for India and for any democratic country which wants to have a rules-based international order.
Right. Thank you. We will move to a last segment, which is a little bit of a fun segment. Let's have a quick fire round with you on your book. One word to describe the Quad.
Resilience.
One book every Indo-Pacific scholar should read.
Unrestricted Warfare by Xiao Liang and Wang Xiangshui. It's from 1999. These are two PLA colonels who outline non-kinetic or unrestricted approaches to warfare.
One misconception about China that frustrates you.
China is formidable. It is the big thing. It has surmounted the US, and one should succumb to China. It's annoying misconception.
A country in the Indo-Pacific you think deserves more attention.
The IND in the Indo-Pacific, India, because history has showcased that be it the West or the East, has not cared enough to understand India's needs and India's foreign policy contours. So I would say it is the IND in the Indo-Pacific.
Nice. Coffee, tea, or chai while learning?
Coffee addict, 6 cups in a day. I should reduce, but coffee.
Print books or ebooks?
Print, hands down, print.
I will totally agree with that. If you were not an academic, what career would you have chosen?
Indian Air Force. I did want to go into it, but in 1997, 98, when I did start preparing for it, and I was a teenager, unfortunately, I met with a bicycle accident and got this. Lost my 6x6 vision,
Right.
which ensures that, back then there was no laser treatment, which means automatically eliminated from the Air Force. This has relevance also because in 1962, I wish we used the Air Force. Also, last year, Operation Sindoor, Indian Air Force. So, next birth, hopefully, Indian Air Force.
Indian Air Force or not, I think you're doing absolutely fine in contributing to India's policy making. That was Professor Sriparna Pathak. Please do get a copy of her book of Strategic Evolution of Quad from Ocean Froth to Asian NATO, published this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again.